You need to pay attention today. You really do. Um, the reason I say that is, this is the last sermon I'm going to be preaching for a little bit. Next week we have a guest coming in. That's Brent Pearson. He's going to come and bring a Family Day message. But keep me in your prayers because I'm going for surgery in a couple of weeks, and so I'll be out of commission for a little bit. I don't know how long. They haven't told me, but I know that it will be a little bit of time. So if you can please keep me in your prayers. But that is beside the point. So if you're wondering if you were paying attention last week when I had a little bit of a breakdown of anxiety, that was what it was. But I'm over that because I know that people are praying. So thank you. But so today we're going to continue in our Family Matters sermon series. And so back at about the second week of January, I preached a message that had quotes under family, and it was Family Matters. Last week we did Worship Matters. Does anyone have a guess of what today is? Center Matters. You might be able to get that. You will by the end of the message. So Family Matters, we need to operate in faith that we are doing the will of the Father. That's how we know we are all part of God's family. Worship matters because it's what we do. And that's all about truth, worshiping in spirit and in truth, and what it means to have truth. That's what we dealt with last week. This week we're dealing with center matters. That's where we are. It's where we gather. The phrase center matters has a few closely related meanings, but and it depends on how it's used. Just because of that word matters, we've talked about that before, that it first of all could be just issues that are related to the place of gathering. So most commonly it refers to personal preferences involving where one gathers, and this changes. You know, sometimes you look at during our isolation time when COVID hit, and there was a lot of controversy in that in regards to churches and stuff like that. But some people chose to gather. Some people chose to stay at home. And the sad thing is there are still people today that have chosen that that's their priority, is to stay at home, and they watch it by online or they've stopped completely. But then there's also the emphasis that the place of gathering is important. It can be a statement meaning that where we gather is important and it should be prioritized. When you look at the trends and how things have changed, one question looms. What is worship going to look like in 10 to 15 years? What will it look like? You know, you look at how things operate. You know, back in my growing up years, it seemed to me, of course I wasn't really paying attention strongly, but it seemed to me that when you had an event, you had to turn people away from volunteering. Nowadays, you have to fight to find people to volunteer. And it's really just the trend. It's how things are going in the world. You look at any organization that is operating in Manning, and they will tell you the same thing. It's hard to find volunteers. So it's not just a church thing. It's more than that. But if you look at the trend of that and other things, and people having priorities elsewhere, what is church going to look like in 10 to 15 years? The thing is, it's not about church in the sense of the place that you gather. It's not about how the message is given. Those are important things, but it's not about just that. It's really about kingdom people being kingdom people in everyday life. That's what church is. The key is getting people to be kingdom people. The purpose of gathering is what is important. So in Hebrews 10, I want to read to you from verse 23 to 25. And so it says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." So it starts out, it says, hold fast the confession of our hope. Well, how do you do that? Well, the best way is you find out what the confession of your hope is. That you find that by coming to church, because we try to teach how to have a confession of hope and holding fast to that confession. And that's another message in and of itself. But it's without wavering, because God is faithful. So if we find our truth in God, then we can hold fast to that confession without wavering. Then it says, let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. And it's really simple. Not forsaking our own assembling together, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Do not forsake gathering together, but encourage one another. And if we go to the book of Romans chapter 1 and verses 11 and 12, Paul says to the church of Romans, "For I long to see you so that I may impart some spiritual gift to you, that you may be established. That is, that I may be encouraged together with you while among you, each of us by the other's faith, both yours and mine." Just imagine Paul. We hold him in high revere. We hold him in such a high esteem that it's almost like you put it on a Jesus is here and Paul is right underneath, right? Yet he is saying, I want to be with you so that your faith can encourage me. And that really, like for myself, I understand that. Because I need to be encouraged in my faith as well. And you being here encourages me in that. And it's so amazing. I long to see you so that I may impart some spiritual gift to you, yes, that you may be established, that you may have a confession of hope that you can hold fast to, without wavering. But I also want to see you that I may be encouraged together with you, and that each of us, by the other's faith, can be encouraged. And then we go to Hebrews chapter 3, verse 13. And this one says, "But encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin." Well, do you worry about sin? Then gather together to encourage one another. Because that's what this says. Gather day by day, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Encourage one another day by day, as long as it's still called today. So, question for you, as you live life day by day, how many of those days are called today? Every day is called today. Yes, there's tomorrow, but you're not living in that day. Yes, there's yesterday, but you shouldn't be living in that day. You should be living in today. And as long as it's today, it says encourage one another so that you won't be carried away by the deceitfulness of sin. It's so strong how we need to gather together. Isolating ourselves from one another only encourages the opposite of what is trying to be accomplished. Last week we looked at the things that we do when we gather together. I'm not going to read these. I did it last week. You can always look at last week's message. It was Ephesians 5:19 to 21, Philippians 4:6 to 7, Colossians 3:16. And in those you sing, there's praying, there's teaching, admonishing, encouraging, and good works. Those are the things we're supposed to do when we're together or encouraging one another to do them. And we've already talked about the day by day, but I want to also show you that that's what the early church did. In Acts chapter 2, verse 46, it says, day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart. They were day by day, both in the church building, it was in the temple back then, and in one another's homes. And what were they doing? Well, if you look at the verses prior, it says everyone kept feeling a sense of awe. Many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles, and all those who had believed were together and had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with all, as anyone might have need. Day by day, continuing with one mind in unity. So, I'm not telling you that we all need to start selling our possessions and giving away to people in need. But giving to people in need is important. But what were they doing? They were praising God and having favor with all the people. They were being generous. They weren't just hoarding their money. And how much do we do that? We're told in umpteen ways throughout our days, whether it be through ads or through people's experiences, we are being told that we should be hoarding our money, preparing for a better day. And it's prudent. But at the same time, if we're hoarding it to such an extent that we're forsaking the law of God, then what is that? You know, I'm happy that our church gives about 12% to missions. But just imagine what it could be if it was 25%. There's a book out that's written by Mark Batterson called All In, and it's written, in that whole idea of the Texas Hold'em poker where you go all in. And he talks about the fact of how most of us live with 90% of our income and giving 10% to the church. At least that's how it's supposed to be. If you don't, well, that's another message. But he endeavors that one day he will be at 90% giving, 10% living. And I can tell you from personal experience, I give more than 10%. I'm not going to tell you how much I give, but I do give more than 10%, and I noticed the change right away. Not the change in regards to, oh no, where's my money going to come from, but the, oh my goodness, where did that money come from? It's amazing. Back in the day when Jen and I were having difficulty tithing or finding the principle of tithing, of the 10%, we were struggling month to month with our bills. We started giving 10%. The bills stayed the same, the income stayed the same, but our bank account was more. Doesn't make any sense at all. But when does God make sense in the natural? So I encourage you, a side sermon in the midst of a sermon, all about being generous. So let's go back to Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. I want to go through this a little bit. It says, not forsaking our own assembling together. Now, some people just choose to not go to church, and that's Christians included. Sad to say. Sometimes it happens. I do understand that, but what the writer of Hebrews is saying, don't make it a habit of staying away. Rather, make it a priority to gather together. So in my growing up years, we rarely missed church. Dad, of course, was a pastor, but we've rarely missed church, even on vacation. I remember one time in April of 1980, maybe 81. Doesn't matter. But it was one of those two. I was young, but I remember we were traveling to the States. We drove from Edmonton to Los Angeles. We wanted to go to Disneyland. Dad did too, just saying. One of our favorite stories about Dad is that we took all these pictures all the way along, all the way down there. We went to, I think it was Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm or Universal Studios, taking all these pictures, and we got onto a ride at Knott's Berry Farm and realized he never had any film in. So I've missed that entire trip. The Salt Lake City, we went to the Mormon temple and looked at that. We went to Las Vegas. We actually went and ate at a casino and walked around the casino because you were allowed to. And it was amazing, and all these pictures that were taken. Yeah. Anyhow, it's just living in my brain now. But on one of those places, we stopped for a Sunday. And Dad said, we're going to church. And we said, where are we going to go to church? He says, I don't know, we'll find one. We'll just drive around. And he said, let's look for one that doesn't have the word Pentecostal in it. And we were like, well, why? He says, because that's the Pentecostal churches in America. They have Assemblies of God or Church of God. Or they do have a Church of God of Pentecost. But in Canada at that time, like our organization, the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada, most of your churches had Pentecostal in the name. Rocky Mountain House Pentecostal Church, Settler Pentecostal Assembly. We had Sherwood Park Pentecostal Assembly. I'm trying to go through all the ones. We did have a Christian Life Assembly back in Winnipeg. But their Pentecostal churches, for some reason, wanted to get away from the stigma that was attached to that name. Anyhow, we went to church on vacation. And I can count on my hand how many times we missed church on vacation. It was a priority to Dad. So I did the math. I've been to approximately 6,000 services in my years. That means, yes, I have heard about 6,000 different messages. 6,000 sermons, of which 10% of them approximately are the ones that I've given. But let me tell you, it wasn't the sermons that had the most effect in my life. I've forgotten probably 5,900 of those sermons. Maybe even 5,999 of those sermons, because I remember this one right now because I've been working on it. Do I remember last week's? Some of it. But it wasn't the sermons that really made a difference. They were important for that time. But what I do remember about all the churches and services that I've been to are the people. The relationships that I developed through that. I have one friend that I've actually communicated with just this last week that I've known since I was 3. And I would consider him probably my best lifelong friend. I haven't seen him in 14 years. But I know that as soon as we connect, it's like it was yesterday. I connected with him because he doesn't know that I was going for surgery. I'm going for surgery in Edmonton, and he's going to come and visit because I reached out to him and said, hey, would you like to visit with me? It's in the hospital, but whatever. He's a pastor, so he actually has chaplain privileges, and he can come in. But it's one of those things. It's the people that I remember. But I remember a good old wise man that used to come to this church. His name was Bill. And right now, all of you are thinking of the sayings of Bill, because Bill had a lot of them. And I would ask him, I would say in services, and you've had me say this quite often, what did I preach on last week? Or what did I preach on last month? Do you remember this sermon? And he says, I don't remember those sermons. But my wife has cooked for me countless amount of times in the last 10 years, and I don't remember all of the meals. But they meant something for me at the time. And it was like, wow. That is very wise. We need to get a book together of the wisdom of Bill. It's just amazing. I quote him so often. It's those connections, the relationships, the family. Hebrews 10:25 goes on to say it's encouraging one another. Well, let me ask you, can you one another alone? You can't. It's not possible. Even if you have multiple personality syndrome, it's just really hard to do one another alone. Yes, I talk to myself quite regularly. I'm sure you do too. It's actually a form of proving sanity. I prove it over and over and over every single day. But you cannot one another alone. It requires physical and intentional presence. Church is not a spectator sport or a sermon delivery system. It's what we do. You're here watching me preach. You're watching me deliver a sermon. But it's not the Super Bowl. That's tonight. And I can tell you who's going to win. The one with the most points. The church is not a spectator sport or a sermon delivery system. It's an encouragement driver. It's an encouragement engine. It's something that we need to really get down, and I think we do it good. But we always need to improve. You don't just go to get something when you go to church. You go to be something for someone else. And that's the important thing. That's why I remember people from my past. And all the churches that I've been a part of. All the camp services. You know, we'd go to camp and at Riverside, I don't know if it's always been this way, but the family camp is a weekend. Our family camp was 2 to 3 weeks. And we went every day, morning and night, and probably a Bible study in the middle. When I was going to church, we had Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, or Tuesday night. When I was in West Virginia, I actually did all the math. I went through all the years of what services I would have gone to mostly. 6,000. 6,000 services. If you did the math, what would yours be? And do you remember the people or do you remember the sermons? I would venture a guess that you're the same as me. You remember the people and the relationships and the family. So to summarize this, evaluate your habit. Do you come to church out of convenience or commitment? Those are important to know. Why do you choose to come to church? Or go to church, wherever you may choose to go, even on vacation, if you choose to go. Do you go out of convenience or out of commitment? Identify your one. Who is it that you came here when you came here that you could encourage every time that you come here? Or do you just come in and go out? You know, we need to give encouragement, but we need to give opportunity for someone to encourage us. Those are important. Evaluate your habit. Identify your one. So we're going to go to communion today, but before I do, I'd like to close with a write-up that I had read the other day. And it says, "The church is the 86-year-old grandma who has sat in the pew her whole life and suddenly discovers just how deeply loved she is, and she can't stop smiling. It's the tattooed man who spent 10 years in federal prison and now shines as the light of the world. Church is the college professor with a PhD who awakens to her true worth and releases love freely to her students. The church is the one once bound but now flies, yet returns to the jails to love the unloved. It's the Amish who break free from shackles to live in the fullness of life and love. It's the addict who discovers there is no high like the Most High. The church is the one voted least likely to succeed who becomes a physician and a healer of souls. It's the woman deeply wounded by racial division who begins to heal and discovers how truly one we are in Christ. Church is the man who once lost in mental torment who finds right-mindedness and begins to live life to the fullest. The church is the homeless who find their home in the warm embrace of the Father. It's widows who discover a husband in Christ and a family of like-minded friends. It's the quilter who once stitched fabric and now sews the love of the Father into every life she touches. The church is the singer who becomes a song maker, releasing a new sound. It's the woman who sets a feast in her home for strangers. It's missionaries who rediscover their mission, ignited in fields of grace all around them. The church is the lonely and misunderstood who finally find their tribe. It's two people brought together, now living a wild and beautiful adventure. The church is the woman with a song that takes our breath away. It's couples who show up week after week, growing together in their true oneness, and friends who bring us joy. The church is friends we've met face to face, and family we've never met, scattered across foreign lands, yet somehow feel closer than blood. It's the joy each of you bring to my heart when we gather each week. The church is each one of us discovering our true identity in Christ and finding our voice to share with others what we have discovered. The church is heart connection, an overflowing oneness that binds us together like family. We may come from different backgrounds, cultures, and countries, but the one thing that binds us is love. Because in each and every one of you, I see Christ. And together we reveal the fullness of Christ in full view. Whether you've been with us for 50 years or 50 minutes, you are family. And together, we are Family Worship Center. And Family Worship Center matters. So we're going to go to a time of communion, but I'm going to ask that the live feeds go off. We're going to do a little bit something different.